Hello, and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On this episode, I want to talk about praise kink. It's something that it's been around for a while, but seems to be growing more in fashion when we talk about praising someone or, giving them accolades for things that they've done inside of a DS dynamic. What we need to understand is sexual fetishes are varied and diverse, often eliciting strong reactions from people who are unfamiliar with them. What we do understand, as this is gaining more attention, praise kink needs to be defined first. So when we look at praise kink, it's the sexual arousal or pleasure that someone receives, especially from the experiences of being praised by their sexual partner. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to kind of explore this concept with all of you. Explore the concept of praise kink, its origins, the psychological and physiological effects this has on people. So first, I want to look at the origins of the praise kink. The origins of the praise kink are not entirely clear, so we don't necessarily know where they started or where they developed from, or as far as when it first was introduced into the larger fetish community. However, it is believed to stem from the desire for validation and approval from others, especially from approval of our dominance or even just sometimes our sexual partners that may or may not just be into the lighter aspects of the kink scene. Praise is a form of positive reinforcement, and when given in a sexual context, it can enhance pleasure and arousal. Additionally, praise can be seen as a form of dominance, and some people find the power dynamic of being praised by a sexual partner extremely arousing. Furthermore, the desire for the validation and approval from others is a basic human need, and this is something we can't discount. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the need for esteem and recognition is a fundamental need that must be fulfilled before individuals can reach self-actualization. In this sense, the praise kink can be seen as a way for individuals to fulfill this need in a sexual context. By receiving praise from a sexual partner, individuals may feel validated and recognized, which can enhance their sense of self-worth and their self-esteem, overall making them feel like a better person. Another potential explanation for the praise kink is the role of conditioning. Positive reinforcement, such as praise, is often used in operant conditioning to increase the likelihood of behavior being repeated, especially if that behavior is desired or wanted. If a person has received praise in the past for certain sexual behaviors, they may develop a positive association between praise and sexual pleasure, right? So this isn't a major leap that we're trying to make here. We do understand that there's already this correlation that exists inside of this world. Now, despite the origins of the praise kink being not completely clear, it's important to recognize that it has to be consensual and it's a harmless sexual practice. As long as it's practiced between consenting adults, there's no reason for the individuals involved to feel ashamed or judged for their sexual preferences and desires. As a matter of fact, this gives people more leeway to explore some of these things, such as praise kink, that allow them to open up about their own sexuality. Now, while praise kink is just one example of how positive reinforcement can enhance our sexual pleasure and our arousal states, there are also the negative reinforcement techniques that can have the opposite effect. They use punishment in sexual contexts, for example. These in turn can decrease sexual pleasure or in turn can even decrease our arousal sensitivity. So now I want to start exploring the concept of the psychological effects of praise. What we need to understand is that praise has been shown to have positive effects on people's self-esteem and motivation and their performance. A study in 1998 by Elliott and DeWick found that children who were praised for their effort rather than their ability were more likely to take on challenging tasks and persist in the face of failure, right? Additionally, praise has been shown to improve performance in academic and athletic settings. Now, what we've started to see is as this transition moved forward and we started to understand, and psychologists started to realize that praise can translate into people working harder, or as they feel better about themselves, they're more productive. The corporate world, even the military, law enforcement, has started to adopt some of these strategies that they learned and to implement them. So, for example, in the military, when I served, if you did a good job, you were rewarded, you were honored, and this made you, in turn, want to work harder, right? Because then we start feeling those same accolades. We might go out, get up for promotion. We are enjoying that little bit of attention that we're receiving. And it feels nice to be rewarded and told we're doing really well for the work that we're doing, right? So the psychological effects of praise can also extend, as I've talked about before, then they start extending into the realm of sexuality, where we understand and have, over the last 20, 30 years, have seen that this sexual pleasure and arousal stemming from praise has been growing more and more. The one reason why this is so difficult to report on is because most of the scales that do report on this are all self-reporting scales. So it's not completely accurate, and getting a control study or group makes it a little bit more difficult. However, in a sexual context, praise can provide individuals with a sense of validation and that affirmation, which can be particularly important for those who struggle with low self-esteem or body image issues, right? And as we come into a world that's more accepting of all of us, that allows us to be who we are and enjoy the world that we're in, and understand that we are who we are, big or small, race, religion, creed, none of that matters. We can now get that validation inside of our relationships and our sexual dynamics, right? The positive reinforcement of praise can also help us to build trust and intimacy between both between our sexual partners, right? It creates a safe and supportive environment for exploring sexual desires and these preferences that we may or may not want to expand on outside of our own personal or private thoughts. However, we have to understand, and it's important to note, that the effects of praise on sexual pleasure and arousal may vary depending on the individual preferences and experiences of those involved. Conversely, there is a conversation I'm going to do, or a podcast here in the future, when I talk about deconditioning. When we're slowly conditioned over time, potentially through praise or positive reinforcement, operant conditioning, what happens then when we break up and now all of this is taken away from us? But I'm going to do that in another one, but there is a strong correlation between the two. So getting back to this, what we need to understand is, in contrast to praise, like I spoke of before, punishment in the sexual context can have these negative psychological effects on certain individuals, and it's not on everybody. But punishment, such as a verbal or physical aggression, can cause feelings of fear, shame, guilt. These negative emotions can lead to a decrease in sexual pleasure and arousal, as well as a breakdown in trust and intimacy between two people in a relationship, a dynamic, or just even sexual partners, like friends with benefits, right? Additionally, the use of punishment in sexual contexts can be a form of abuse and should never be practiced without explicit and enthusiastic consent from all parties involved. And we understand this because our world, our fetish community, our BDSM community revolves around consent, right? And that's one thing that we need to constantly keep in mind, that we're not doing degradation, or we're not doing even praise and positive reinforcement without somebody understanding the potential pitfalls of what we're entering. Ultimately, the use of positive reinforcement, such as praise, can enhance our sexual pleasure. It can enhance our arousal, while the use of punishment, as I spoke about before, can have these negative effects. not just on individuals, but their psychological well-being and their sexual experiences. As with any preference or behavior, we have to understand how to communicate, how to talk, how to be open, how to be honest, and talk about the things that we may or may not want to explore, especially within this context. What boundaries we're going to set in place when we're talking about something like praise kink. What kind of clear communication, enthusiastic consent we can explore together so we can enjoy this and other types of sexual experiences that involve something like positive reinforcement, phrases, or more specifically, praise. So, what are some of the physiological effects of praise? Praise has been shown to have a physiological effect on people. There was one study that found that positive verbal feedback resulted in increased activity in the brain's reward center. The increased activity was similar to the activity seen in response to monetary rewards. So you win a big cash prize and you're very excited. So all these areas of our brain are kind of lighting up. Additionally, praise has been shown to increase levels of dopamine in the brain, which is associated with feelings of pleasure and reward. These physiological effects of praise can contribute to the pleasure and arousal experienced by individuals with the praise kink. Furthermore, the physiological effects of praise can extend outside of these as we've been talking. But through positive reinforcement, such as praise, it's been shown to have beneficial effects on physical health. There was one study in 2005 that found individuals who received positive social interactions, including praise, had higher levels of different internal chemicals, immunoglobulin for one, and antibody that helps fight infections, compared to those who received negative social interactions. In another study, they found that people who received positive social interactions had lower levels of inflammatory markers, which were associated with a large range of chronic diseases. These findings suggest that the physiological effects of receiving praise can have a positive impact on both our mental and physical health. So I don't want this, though, to be taken out of context here, right? Because I don't want you to go out and say, okay, well, I heard this, so this is true. There are these studies, and they are out there about praise and these markers, and they're constantly ongoing. I'm not saying that don't jump into praise because you want to explore it or you are interested in it or it does get you off, but don't go into it saying that I'm telling you that it's going to reduce all these things. These are just things that have happened. So you just want to kind of sometimes put these disclaimers out there, right? But these studies do exist. The one, like I mentioned, that the second one here in 2006, it's quite a long read, but it was really talking about even its effects on chronic diseases. What we need to understand with praise kink, though, isn't without controversy. It's important to recognize that it's consensual sexual practice and that it can enhance our sexual pleasure and arousal for those who enjoy it, as I've talked about before, right? With any one of these preferences or behaviors, as we communicate and talk more with our partners and exploring these boundaries and engaging in this type of activity or this type of kink, especially if we disregard that enthusiastic or explicit consent, can lead us down a path where we're no longer enjoying this activity and it can end up having the reverse effect that we are initially looking for. By understanding the psychological, by understanding the physiological effects of praise, individuals inside of our community can better understand their own sexual preferences and desires and can engage in sexual activities that are both pleasurable and healthy. While praise kink is a relatively new concept that's gained a lot more attention in recent times, especially over the last 5 years, we understand that there's this need for validation and approval from others, that there are positive psychological and physiological effects of praise that can enhance our overall pleasure zones and our arousal. Sexual fetishes can elicit these strong reactions from people who are unfamiliar with them. And it's important to recognize that they are natural and a normal part of human sexuality. And if you are unfamiliar, you should be taking the time, especially if someone says, hey, I'm into this kink, I've been practicing this kink for a while. It's important to take time to talk to them and get to understand more about the kink that you're exploring, not just diving in head first. Understanding these origins and their effects of praise kink can help individuals explore and understand their own preferences and their own desires in a safe and consensual manner, which is what the community has always been about. We have to keep one thing in mind, right? Especially about praise kink. Like all other sexual preferences, it's not universal, and not everyone's going to enjoy it. Not every submissive, not every slave or dominant is going to want to partake inside of this type of kink and its practice. Sexual preferences and desires are personal and can vary greatly from individual to individual. And I want to really emphasize that. Sexual preferences are personal, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with liking something or focusing in on something, but you have to remember that if that's something that you enjoy and it's not something particular that someone else is comfortable doing, then this may not be the type of kink, although I would agree that it's, not in the same realm of impact or blood or needle play or any of those. But if somebody's not into it and it doesn't feel natural for them, you may want to consider taking them to a workshop or showing them more information about it. But if they're not, then this may not be one kink that you're going to want to explore. However, this seems to be more what I would say universal in its regard, meaning that I know plenty of dominants that are quite praising of their submissives, that if their submissive does something good, there's a reward. And if they're conversely, if they do something wrong, then the submissive is punished or admonished in some fashion, right? Ultimately, praise kink can be consensual and can be healthy, especially for those who are enjoying it, diving into it, and understanding these effects. And understanding these psychological and physiological effects of praise can really help individuals, especially those within our community, explore those sexual desires and preferences while even learning how to expand their communication skills with one another, and be open and honest with their partners. As with all of our preferences, we have to prioritize and be explicit about our consent. And this isn't something you really want to role play, or you may not even be comfortable with. Someone may not want to be told, you know what, I don't want to be told I'm a good boy or a good girl. And there's nothing wrong with that. There may be connotations, something like praise kink can bring up past feelings or past traumas, right? Especially if somebody has had some issues in childhood, this can be problematic. So exploring and talking about the kink and what can be involved, or how you two want to roadmap that out, is what's a key first step in a lot of the things that we should be doing inside of the BDSM and fetish community. We should be having these discussions and talking about who knows about not only their roles, but what the kink that we're going to explore and what it entails. And with something like this, what could the effects of all of this positive reinforcement have over time? What is the downside if our relationship doesn't work out, and then all of a sudden all of that positive reinforcement is now taken away or is missing? Then what happens to us next, right? By prioritizing respect, communication, consent, individuals can enjoy all of these types of activities and this specific kink and enhance their pleasurability, increase their healthiness, and feel more fulfilled as part of their relationship dynamic. And that's really what we're after inside of a DS dynamic. I've always argued that inside of DS, it is far more, requires a lot more effort than typical vanilla relationships. And I say this because we're constantly having to talk, we're constantly being rejected on certain things we want to do or not want to do. So when we get inside of this realm, we have to put that kind of work into our relationship. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if this is a kink that's really kind of starting to garner some interest from you. Learn about it. Don't learn specifically, don't just start hunting for material surrounding praise and kink. Start learning about the effects of praise on your body. So the physiological responses, look deeper into it. Learn about the psychological responses to praise. If you're a dominant and you're looking to take control, understand what you're doing when you're conducting positive reinforcement and its possible long-term psychological and emotional effects on the person you're with. These are things that we have to consider and things that we typically do not think about within the lifestyle, but that have long-lasting effects. And all we really want to do is have a really great time, have a positive and healthy relationship, and move forward and keep exploring as a couple together. So if for any of you out there, I'd really like to hear back from you. If you've had any experience with praise kink, leave a comment in the comment section below when I post this to social media. And I'd like to know more what types of praise you've received. How often was the praise? What even happened after maybe a dynamic ended and this was something you were doing and now you're left without the praise? How did you cope? So I look forward to hearing some of those and kind of engaging further in this topic. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.